Hello and welcome to episode 3 of the Apple for the Teacher podcast. My name is Anna Thomas and I'm so glad you can join me. I'm a primary school teacher and still currently working as I put this podcast together. Hopefully, I can bring out an episode every fortnight, and if you go to the Facebook page called Apple for the Teacher, I will announce when episodes are available with a brief preview. I would love to give shout outs to listeners, so I would love to meet you on Facebook and also in the Facebook private group. My aim is to bring true stories about all aspects of the school system and the people associated with them, whether they be teachers, students, principals, parents, or other school staff. Some stories I call the bad apples. These are examples of true crimes committed against others, people engaging in improper conduct, and showing lack of judgment and ethical behaviour. You will hear stories of murder, suicide, hijacking, sexual misconduct, lawsuits, kidnapping, and bullying. Every story you will hear actually happened. Other stories are called good apples, people showing bravery in the face of unthinkable events and upholding high standards of conduct. So far in this podcast, we have seen a child murder, a school shooting, the murder of a teacher, and a school bus hijack. Yes, all this within the school system. As I research stories for this podcast, it has amazed me the stories I have come across. The scope is far more reaching than I had anticipated. I really had no idea of the breadth of what has occurred in my own profession, both good and bad. I have so much content so far, and I hope you will stay with me as I bring these truly remarkable stories to you. So, buckle up. It's going to be a wild ride. So, let's get into the first bad apple story. It contains a crime committed against an individual and may not be suitable for everyone. The year was 2014. Anne Maguire was a high school teacher at the Corpus Christi Catholic College in Leeds, England. It was her day off, but she decided to go to school to help pupils prepare for their exams. She was 5 months away from retiring after 40 years at the college. What happened that day would become an awful tragedy, yet not a surprise to some. Anne was in her Spanish class when a student stabbed her multiple times in the neck with a knife. He had been at a computer when he showed a knife to the boy next to him, asking him to check it was sharp. The boy refused and watched him as he walked normally over to Anne. As he left, he turned to the other boy and winked. The knife was 21 centimetres long, yet Anne managed to stagger out into the corridor as pupils screamed and fled. The boy chased her as she tried to flee to safety. Another teacher came upon the harrowing scene and separated and shielded Anne from the boy. She was taken away into another room where the door was held shut to keep the boy out. He then returned to his class and told a friend it was a shame he had not killed her. Anne was in a bad state, saying, "I can't breathe, I'm dying." The ambulance arrived, and once at the hospital, resuscitation was attempted, but sadly, Anne passed away. The student was arrested, and the police officer recalled him asking, "What's your favourite movie and adrenaline sport?" He then smiled, showing no remorse for what he had done. He had had a deep-seated grudge against Anne. They had clashed after she refused to let him drop Spanish studies. He also had a run-in with her after failing to do his Spanish homework, which resulted in his parents being called to school. He had been in her class since year 7, and it came out later that the grudge had been going on for 3 years. He had told other pupils at the school that he planned to murder Anne, and had also put out a Facebook message to his friends to see if any of them would murder her for him for a payment of £10. He also asked a classmate to video the attack, but his classmates did not believe he was serious. One student did report it to a teacher, but it had come too late. Another backed down from reporting it when he threatened to kill the pupil as well. Even those who saw the kitchen knife stashed up his sleeve did not think he would actually use it, because he was known for his dark sense of humour. 4 months before the murder, he asked on Facebook, "So, if I kill Maguire on Tuesday in school, will you bail me out?" He also had a favourite song called Jungle Boogie from the movie Pulp Fiction, which he would often play out loud in the classroom. This movie is often referred to as the Killing Spree movie. I personally haven't seen it, as I'm aware of its violence, and it's not something that I willingly choose to watch. So perhaps those of you who know the song and the movie can have an idea of the boy's state of mind. That day he murdered Anne, he had brought a bottle of whiskey to school to celebrate, and admitted that he planned to kill 2 other teachers, including one who was pregnant. He told doctors his plan was to stab her in the stomach to kill her unborn child. He also said he killed Anne so that he could spend the rest of his life in jail and not have to worry about life or money. During the investigation, he said, quote, "It's kill or be killed. I did not have a choice. It was kill her or suicide. I know the victim's family will be upset, but I don't care. In my eyes, everything I've done is fine and dandy." At the trial, he pleaded guilty to murder and was jailed for life with a minimum term of 20 years. Following this tragedy, there have been calls for a school policy of "see a knife, tell a teacher" to be rolled out nationally in the UK, and also that social media companies should bring in contracts to make parents responsible for their children's messaging, and to have anyone under 18 to have to apply to open a social media account with a named parent on the application. At Anne's funeral service, among those paying tribute were Pope Francis and Prime Minister David Cameron, who sent written condolences. During the eulogy to his wife, Mr. Maguire said she had loved teaching. A dream as a very young child, an ambition in teenage years, a fulfilling reality for 40 years, he said. But in true humility, she always stressed that she learned so much from others. Spanish was her subject. The pace and rhythm of modern language teaching suited her so well. Being head of 5th form was a great passion, because this is where the full range of her personal qualities and abilities were fully exercised. A loving wife, the best mother, a treasured sister, a true friend. This horrific happening has robbed us all of this and so much more. We are devastated. Her selfless, genuine, caring nature will remain with us eternally. Our beautiful Anne, our shining light, she brightened the world for so many of us. We are overwhelmed by the support, sympathy, and kind tributes we have received. They have been a source of great comfort at this dark time. Anne, we will love you always. your loving family. Students described her as the perfect teacher, and flowers and other tributes stretched more than 100 metres outside the gates of the college. One student said, "What I remember most about her was her determination to get the best from us, to put into our heads what we needed to get through to get by. That caring, that intensity could at times spill over into fierceness, goaded by some jackass, or when she came across bullying or unkindness in others. But it isn't the fierceness that I remember when I think of her. I think of her face, always on the verge of a smile, her consideration, the way she listened when you spoke to her and tried to answer, rather than fob you off. I remember her kindness and consideration for me." A teacher at the school told a story of how Mrs. Maguire once became concerned when a colleague did not turn up for work. She insisted on going around to his house and found he had suffered a brain hemorrhage, probably saving his life. That's the sixth sense she had, the other way of understanding and knowing she had, he said. In her own words, Anne once said, "You have to love children and you have to be in tune with their individual needs. Children are fascinating. Every child is different. And you have to adapt your approach to each one. I've always tried to be myself and make a connection with every child, tuning in with their needs and encouraging them to aspire." Mrs. Maguire's family have established the Anne Maguire Educational Fund, which provides bursaries and support for the enhancement and personal development of young people through music, drama, language, and dance. The fund honours Anne's memory and benefits children and young people through educational activities about which she felt so passionately. Donations can be made via www.justgiving.com/Anne Maguire. Well, that was a pretty rough story. Due to his age, the sentence has been debated by youth justice campaigners, but I would prefer to leave this legal argument to the justice system, and I'm going to discuss the case from a school point of view. What struck me about this story is that he told people what he was going to do, but they didn't take it seriously. A student did report it to the school, but the report was made only several minutes into the lesson when Anne was murdered. This is just so tragic. It was so close to being prevented. While I need to make sure not to blame the other students, in my opinion, it seems like a case of bystander apathy, which is something that we discuss at school frequently. We tell students if they see bullying happening or any other inappropriate behaviour that they must tell someone. Her death was so senseless, and he had told others on multiple occasions about his hatred for her and what he wanted to do. I just so feel for the family. I would have felt that it was just so preventable. While I'm an adult and can take the appropriate action, the students in this case were high school students, and I really can't fathom that no one had the presence of mind to report it. But then again, I've only worked with primary school children who will tell on one another for something as trivial as just taking another student's rubber or making eye contact the wrong way. So I guess older kids just don't do this. There may be a code of teachers versus students, perhaps. If you're a high school teacher, let me know what it's like. Is there a code of silence? Are you surprised that no one said anything? If I put myself in her place, it's unimaginable that I could be in my classroom and someone comes up from behind and stabs me. I would imagine the boy who he showed the knife to may have felt responsible that he didn't act or say something. But I guess it only took seconds for him to walk over to her. And I don't perhaps think he probably could have done anything in hindsight. As a follow-up to this case, his life sentence was appealed, but the court rejected the appeal against the minimum term of 20 years, saying that on the disturbing facts of the case, the sentencing judge came to entirely the right decision. So, quite a few issues to ponder in this case, and I'd really like to hear your opinion, particularly if you're a high school teacher, and just to set the scene of what the climate is like with older students. Do they tend to keep things amongst themselves? And is it a bit of, we're not going to tell the teacher because the teacher's the enemy or anything like that? Like, as I said, I haven't taught in high school, so I don't know what it's like. So for me, the fact that no one said anything, I just can't believe that no one said anything. So let me know what you think. You can email me at applefortheteacherpodcast@gmail.com or make a comment on the Facebook page or the Facebook group. I'd really like us to have a discussion about this particular episode. So let's now go on to story 2. This story starts as a bad apple, but the outcome is a positive one. This is the story of a man named David Gregory, who is now 40 years of age. But we tell his story back when he was in high school. He attended the Farrer Memorial Agricultural High School, which was a government-funded, single-sex, secondary, day and boarding school for boys in Australia in the 1990s. David was subjected to persistent bullying over the course of his years at the school. He was called names, ridiculed about his political views and sexuality, demeaned about his size, embarrassed or excluded by other students, and also physically bullied. One incident involved a hockey stick being used to hook him between his legs, hitting his genitals. He endured years of feeling unwanted, embarrassed, and humiliated. As the school was a boarding school, the abuse he encountered didn't stop at the end of the school day. 13 years after leaving the school, David decided to bring the matter to court and sued for the treatment he had endured and for the effect it had on his life. So let's look at what the school was like back during that time. During his testimony, the court heard how the school operated a system of discipline called the SAC system. It was based on a hierarchy requiring younger students to obey directions from older students. The students described it in this way. In Year 7, you've got no rights. In Year 12, you've got all the rights. It gave older students authority to inflict punishment for disobedience. The 3 most common punishments were being hit on the hands with a ruler, being hit on the backside with a broom, and being forced to stand guard outside the Year 12 dormitory, holding up a broom and rubbish bin lid. The school actively allowed this system to take place. Students told of punishments such as having their heads held between speakers on loud volume, being forced to fill a pond on the prefect's lawn 1 cup at a time from a tap 50 metres away, and being stripped naked and thrown into an icy pool in mid-winter. The court also heard about the end-of-year ritual where the Year 12s stood at one end of the oval and the rest of the school at the other, with mattresses padding the intervening ground. At the sound of a whistle, they would launch themselves at one another, 13, 14 and 15-year-old boys against 18-year-old men in a mass wrestle. Anybody caught punching would be whacked by the principal with a stick. The ritual was finally stopped in the early 1900s after a series of broken bones occurred. So we've seen what the culture was like at the school and the type of environment that David was part of. David had complained to the school about his treatment, but felt ignored or that nothing would change as a result of his complaints. The school had a fair discipline code which stated that bullying was considered unacceptable behaviour. The document was regularly distributed to the students at assembly. David dismissed the document as nothing more than words on paper. He considered it to just be a well-drafted policy which looked good and said the right things, but it wasn't supported by action. David was also experiencing nightmares and began cutting himself with razor blades. He was diagnosed with agoraphobia, which is excessive cleaning, and OCD. After leaving school, David's mental health improved, but during 2 periods of time after high school, his condition became more worse. Each of these periods came after an event which reminded him of his experiences during his time at the school. The first event happened about 5 years after he graduated, when he first saw his high school yearbook. In the yearbook, several students listed him under their dislikes and made other derogatory comments about him. There were also changes to his profile, which included listing his nicknames as Lucifer, Pagan, and Satan. He said this made him feel humiliated and embarrassed, and he began having nightmares again and feeling that things were dirty again, referring to his agoraphobia. The second event occurred when he was working at a school's outdoor education campus. While he was there, a boy suffered a panic attack, and David talked with him and calmed him down. After this event, he began to think about how easy it would have been for a teacher to talk and support him when he was at school. His obsessive cleaning returned, which had been diagnosed as obsessive compulsive disorder. He also began behaving in somewhat erratic and unconventional ways. Eventually, his behaviour caused him to be dismissed from the school. The court agreed with David and determined that the school breached its duty of care by failing to exercise due and proper care in relation to his general welfare, failing to have a system of supervision in place to prevent mistreatment, failing to exercise adequate control, allowing the SAC system to operate, and failing to install procedures to deal with mistreatment by other students. David was awarded almost $500,000. He had successfully proved that his psychiatric condition and economic and non-economic losses were suffered due to the school's breach of duty of care. So here is the question I have about this case. Do you think that $500,000 is a considerable amount of money for something that happened in high school, or is it not enough? Do you think schools should have to pay almost $500,000 to everyone who was ever called a name or embarrassed at school or the workplace? If this was the case, many people would be lining up to receive their share. Some may have the view that David was handed a pile of cash just for being picked on. The reason for the damages which were awarded is not that the bullying took place, although there would have been no case without it, but rather the effect that it had on David during high school and afterwards. This case gives us an example of what can happen when students are allowed to bully and harass others at school. Not only does it make a student miserable at school, but it can affect the rest of their life. Teachers are in a unique position to influence the future of so many children. The actual effects may not be known for many years to come. But with all the problems that can come with bullying, it is vital that it is not only considered unacceptable, but that it is also not accepted. There are 2 points that we as teachers and schools should remember. The first is bullying can have a serious impact on children. There is no way to predict the consequences of bullying. For some, it might be an uncomfortable experience that is easily dismissed, and for others, it might be the cause of a serious psychiatric condition. The second point is, it is not enough just to talk. The school had a policy clearly stating bullying was unacceptable, but David was still victimised and his continued complaints were dismissed. There were even instances where he was bullied in front of teachers and nothing was done. A policy by itself will not prevent bullying. Teachers and schools must work to enforce the policy, prevent bullying, console the victim, and discipline the bully as appropriate. So that's the end of the second story, and it brings us to the end of the episode. I hope you enjoyed these 2 stories. As I say in all my episodes, I warmly encourage you to visit the Facebook page and join the Facebook group, where we have the opportunity to discuss the stories presented in this podcast. I also encourage you to send me story suggestions to cover in future episodes and to share your own experiences in the school system. I would love for you to record a story yourself, which I can also include in an episode. Just email me at applefortheteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now I'd like to give you a preview of the next episode, episode 4. It's called Your Money or Your Life and the Lawsuit. Here's a summary. Mary and her students were working in their classroom. Lindsay was a student who was not happy with the grade she received for her project. And to finally end this episode, I will leave you with this quote. Without teachers, life would have no class. Bye for now, and remember to be a good apple.